Now, yesterday, there was a story that came up. It's absolutely tragic story from Val. There were kids that were going to school and the bus had an accident. It was a terrible accident. Now, I thought maybe I'll watch what was online concerning the story later. And I tried to kind of like brush it to the side. But by the afternoon, there was so much of it that I had watched several things concerning the story. Yeah, for a couple of hours, I was just like, so there's these stories that are traumatic and stuff like that. Because I'm in the space of doing content, I do the research and I present it. I try not to watch too much of it, especially too early, because I know, I'm not like some heartless person. It's going to affect me. And so that's where some of the lessons on this of this channel come from. It's because of sitting and thinking concerning some of those things. If you go to my Facebook page, okay, so you have a little bit of a reference. If you go to my Facebook page, Church Reality Check, you'll see the top pinned video. It's a video about Ricky. There's a reason why that video is pinned till date. It's because I realized that my message deeply connected with people when I really try to understand the situation there. If I'm going to talk about it, I want to understand there. I would rather watch stories like that a little bit after I've done my content. I try not to watch that before I do the content because it can affect. So that's why I didn't even do an episode. But this story kind of reminded me of something way back. In my childhood, I was into hero movies a lot. I loved Chinese hero movies, boxing, films like that, where you are undermatched, you don't stand a chance. And the person comes, trains, and they emerge, right? This story type of buildings. I loved stories like, to a point where I would rewatch some of these stories so much that I would know the lines. But this story brought back this childhood thing of me watching hero movies and all these things. And you realize something. I mean, like I didn't realize this now. I realized it then in primary, when I was still a kid. That the hero had something that motivated his fight. There was a Mel Gibson movie, I remember. Policeman follows into justice and so forth, but it was the death of a girlfriend who he was in a relationship with, and they almost attempt to kill. That builds the secondary motivation. So there's these movies that build only singular motivations, but then there's a second. And so I started drawing, and in my stories, in the stories that I would draw, I started to pick up this idea of what motivates the fight. And in a lot of these stories, you will realize grief was part of the storyline. Grief in a lot of stories actually builds what makes the hero, or what takes the hero out. This goes as far as even in Satanism. They use grief. They will use grief in order to channel wealth. And so, because for them, it allows them to build a position of heartlessness. This motivation. So this thing, by motivation, don't get me wrong, okay? I'm still painting the idea of what I was thinking about when I was seeing this. This particular idea of the heroes and their losses and all this type of stuff, it was one of the first things that I remembered when I saw this story. Grief shapes a person. Grief. How grief shapes a person. Paul even talks about it in the Bible, and he says, if the resurrection of Jesus, if the death and resurrection of Jesus doesn't mean anything or didn't happen, we are the worst. He says they should grieve for us. He says we are most miserable of all men. Why? Because we've made such a sacrifice to moderate our lives in a way that's beneficial to everyone. And in most cases, we might even disadvantage ourselves to be a benefit to others. And so as a result of that motivation, we shaped our life in a way that it's always back into benefiting other people. So now, in this video, I wanted us to understand this. Grief shapes a person. Nowadays, have lost meaning, a lot of movies and whatnot, because they either just have roles where they want women to be the heroes. You're like, that was not it. The story. It's not like you want a Spider-Man who's, it's not like you want a Spider-Man who's a woman, just so that you can have a woman Spider-Man. The story originally comes from this young person who has no appeal in society, a person who doesn't look important, and becomes this person who in being unknown, basically. One of the most memorable, which was one of my favorite Spider-Man movies actually, was Peter Parker, right? Where he's saving the train. If you remember, and he goes and he pulls out his thingy, he keeps pulling out his spider webs to stop the train from jumping off the thingy. And the people inside the train who were in the front, the people he had just saved, then hold him and carrying him inside the train because he had ran out of strength. And they pull him in, they lift him in the crowd, and then they put him down. And people are just looking at him. And I think that time the mask was off there. The guy who's a savior, you understand? The guy who's saving all of us is as young as my kid. I'm being saved by someone as young as my child. What motivates the hero arc? There's a grief. And for Spider-Man, where does this grief come from? Is that there was someone in the family whom he had lost, whom he couldn't save. So it builds this crime-solving personality. Grief shapes a person. There are people who 10, 15 years later, after their parents' death, it's not forgetting. I'm not talking about forgetting the thing. No, it's that the grief is still just about the same, to a point where even in the Bible, I think is it David or is it Jonathan? I can't remember exactly. Someone remind me in the comments. God comes to him and says, "For how long will you mourn?" Because grief can shape a person. That's why you'll see, even in relationships, some relationships break down the moment there's a miscarriage. Have you noticed that? Yeah. Listen to all these stories of Miss Jones. What's her name? Minnie Dlamini. People just think, oh no, she just doesn't care. Yeah, there's that. But then at the same time, if you go back to that story and you listen, their relationship crumbled at the point of grief. I think, if I can remember very well, the gentleman had someone pass away or something like that, and they had a miscarriage. Things like that shape and reshape. In the video of Hungani and Thingy, right, Gandrovus, I mentioned this thing. Sometimes during a period of grief, people turn inside. And what it does, it looks like the other person is not there. It looks like only you care. And at that point, this type of grief shapes people. So that's why You want to be there. You want to watch over them. That's another thing. I saw a very interesting report thingy they were making pertaining Bruce Willis, by the way. The internet was attacking his wife when she took Bruce Willis to a professional nursing home, and they were saying, hey, he has all the money, why can't his family take care of him? And she went on an interview and she explained something that people don't understand about taking care of a person who's at that level of health deterioration, memory loss and whatnot. And they mentioned that people mostly, there is a very high, I think it was about 20 to 25% of death caused by people who not caused, but that affects people who take care of people in that state. Yeah, people die for taking care of people at that state. And she said people don't understand how much it takes from you taking care of a person who you love and so forth, and they don't even know you. And sometimes they might be violent, or they might be what. They don't even remember you at sometimes. And so it takes so much that it can completely, grief can shape a person. I don't know how to finish that video, but I thought that was worth something. Grief can shape a person. It's not something you just pass and just look over it. Personally, I became very aware of grief very young, and it was not because of someone dying. No, it was because I used to watch all these movies. I used to watch all these stories, and so I became okay. There's grieving. I mean, like, I didn't have any most interactions with people dying in my family or something like that. But I remember every single time, for my father's side, every single time they saw me, they used to talk about a family member called Samuel. They're like, Samuel used to love this guy. Hey, Samuel used to love Ricky, And I didn't know him, but I could remember him. And the sad part was, of course, I could remember him more than I could remember my dad, because he would be very extra. Like, he wouldn't come back from Joburg and not come fetch me. He would come fetch me with a bicycle. He wouldn't even take a taxi. He would come fetch me with a bicycle. He'd be on this ride for like 2 hours, going to his thing. To a point where there was a period where I wanted to remember him, because I was like, this is a person who's part of my whole life, so it looks like. Grief can affect a person. And so it's part of the human experience. For most of us, we just live completely oblivious of it until it hits. Grief is real. It's real. Strict Reality Show, we do daily Christian commentary videos. As I mentioned, there's no way to close the video.